The Apostles. They stand at the top of the world, collectively known as the 12 super beings. Historical sources say that each of the Apostles possessed incredible power. Some of these creatures could control water, which is comparable in volume to the oceans, while others had the ability to resist entire human empires. Moreover, the Apostles were able to create new worlds out of their own flesh and blood. But the most powerful among them was the Apostle known as Yulman, who possessed boundless power that nothing could compare to. According to the records, his fighting power was far superior to the other apostles, but nothing was known about its origin. The highest category of danger is designated as the apostle. However, when the apostles disappeared, they gradually began to be forgotten, and after that they began to be considered legends at all. The man sneezes slightly, and then, rubbing his nose, thinks about how cold it is in this place. There are snowy mountains around him. He knows that soldiers will come very soon to fight this little dragon. This small dragon rushes, making menacing loud sounds similar to growling. This is an Ice Dragon Warcraft Disaster category. The Disaster category is the most dangerous category in the existing Warcraft classification. It has tremendous power and destructive power. The Ice Dragon Warcraft leads monsters from the north to the Thunderfield. Many creatures, large and small, follow him. In order to protect national security, the From Empire immediately moved its troops to defend the territory from the attack of these creatures. A hard and exhausting battle is about to begin very soon. The soldiers, whose faces reflect fear and panic, wonder if their temporary squad will be able to defeat all these monsters. But perhaps only God knows the answer to this question. Someone's voice gives the order to the first squad, according to which the squad should join the battle. Soldiers, howling and shouting, fully armed, run forward, attack, meeting face to face with the enemies. They attack monsters, and they, in turn, fight back. Monsters are flying even from the air. They are literally everywhere. Soldiers who were rushing into battle before are flying back, wounded and no longer able to continue the battle to resist the enemies, because they so simply destroy them one by one, without even putting much effort into it, while the soldiers themselves are trying their best with all my might. A huge ice dragon explores the battlefield with his penetrating gaze. With one blow of his tail he shakes the air and gets rid of several soldiers at once. The man watching from the side realized long ago that these soldiers are not opponents of these monsters. The disparity in combat power is too great here. Most likely, very soon people will be defeated. Suddenly, a loud female voice is heard, which orders the soldiers not to panic. The man, hearing this sound, turns around, clearly interested in who it could be. The woman continues her speech. She assures that if the enemy is many times stronger, this does not mean that victory will be his. However, if people retreat now, they will all definitely fail. A ball of flame forms above her hand. Raised up, the girl directs it directly at the dragon. Her blow hits right on target. This girl, Sierra Charlotte, is one of the 4 great magicians of the Fram Empire, known as the Fire Witch. She was appointed to lead this army. In the crowd of soldiers, there were immediately those who recognized Mrs. Sierra. After her appearance, the army was inspired. The soldiers seemed to have opened a second wind. Everyone immediately believed that now they have a chance to win. Sierra, full of determination, ordered everyone to charge. The soldiers did as they were told. I will rush into battle with renewed strength against the ice monsters, of which there were a lot. The dragon, who seemed to have been defeated by Sierra, began to stand up, raising his head and then his entire body. He made a loud sound, opening his mouth wide. The soldiers were amazed that the monster could still move. Sierra Charlotte herself was surprised. It seemed impossible, because she used one of the most powerful fire magic attacks, Fire Explosion, and thought that she had already defeated the monster. A shining ice ball began to form near the open mouth of the ice dragon, after which, with one breath, the monster froze the soldiers who tried in vain to avoid this fate, rushing away. Swinging his tail, the dragon hit the frozen ice figures, and they split into pieces, scattered across the battlefield. Sierra gritted her teeth and looked at it, but she decided to act immediately. Jumping down from the cliff on which she stood and towered over the place of battle, she rushed at the dragon with a sword and shouted, proclaiming that she, Sierra, the great magician of the Fram Empire, would not allow this monster to win. The monster's eyes flashed, and with his tail he deflected the blow of the enemy sword. Now the dragon and the great magician, having come together in a duel, glared at each other. He controlled the ice, she controlled the fire. The two opposing elements fought using all their skills. Sierra bounced off the blows, landing on another place. To attack the monster, she created a circle of fire on the ground, while the monster was ready to use its ice sphere again. The girl threw into the attack. The ice dragon did the same. Sierra, around which streaks of fire were rushing, rose into the air, directing her blow at the enemy. The enemy did the same. Their blows, icy and fiery, clashed, but the first was much stronger. Sierra, already exhausted, was thrown aside by this blow. Now she was lying on the ground, coughing, trying to get to her feet. The soldiers looked at her and were surprised that even Mrs. Sierra herself had lost. What should they do now? Someone's sword touched the ground. The frightened soldier looked at his comrades and said with horror that he did not believe. He backed away, and then completely turned around and, convinced that they could not win, rushed to run from here as fast as he could. He was followed by exactly the same soldiers who were afraid to fight and die. They ran after him, their faces full of horror. The army led by Sierra Charlotte was fleeing from the battlefield, not even paying attention to the lady lying on the ground and stretching her hand in their direction. She was left sitting here alone, looking at the back of the fleeing soldiers. In places, her clothes were torn and stained with blood. Her arms and legs were bleeding, but she found the strength to stand up. The girl looked angrily at where all her warriors were running. Now she really hated them. A man's voice rang out behind her. The man asked why she did not run away herself, because it is obvious that they have no chance of winning this battle. The girl turned around to see who the man was. The stranger introduced himself as someone who wanted to earn a few gold coins here, and then again reminded him of the question he had just asked. Why didn't she run away with the others? The girl seemed displeased. She said that the word escape is not and never will be in her dictionary. The man thought it was cute, but said there was no time to talk about it now. Sierra asked what he was talking about, and behind her, the ice dragon was ready to kill. She realized that she was distracted, and immediately turned back to where her enemy was. The monster had already directed his icy blow at her, and the girl, blinking from the light and covering her face with her hands, decided that now it was over. When Sierra realized that there was no blow, she opened her eyes in surprise. The man kept his hand on the nose of the ice dragon, telling Tom that he was interfering with his conversation with this miss. Grabbing the monster's muzzle more comfortably, the guy forcefully pushed him away, saying that such a small creature like him should calm down. The dragon, leaving a trail behind him and lifting snow into the air, flew back. It seems that the actions of this man angered him even more. Rage appeared in his eyes, claws broke stones. The dragon's body was immediately covered with ice. He was ready to attack the guy again. He stretched out his hand forward. Purple circles with some inscriptions appeared in front of her. The guy, smiling, said that this dragon is very naughty, so, unfortunately for the dragon himself, he will be burned. The guy used his magic on this creature and, enveloped in a purple vortex, the dragon screamed. Gradually parts of his body began to disappear, leaving only bones. The guy watched with pleasure. Sierra watched with her mouth wide open. The whirlwind gradually subsided. Soon there was practically nothing left of the dragon, except an ice crystal, which the guy who defeated the dragon took for himself. Throwing this trinket in the air, the guy turned to Sierra, saying that he saved her life, because it would be fine if she went on a date with him at her expense. Sierra Charlotte was sitting on the ground, holding her shoulder with one hand. This guy was able to kill a disaster category monster with one hand. Who is he? Uttering the last words, the girl, deprived of strength, began to fall to the ground, but the guy quickly appeared next to her. He picked her up, who was already unconscious, in his arms. After that, he said that he was a simple mercenary who decided to earn some gold coins. But it was Yulman, the first among the apostles, nicknamed as Limitless. Memories of the ice dragon, of the guy who killed him, made Sierra wake up screaming. Her eyes were wide open, her hands were clutching the blanket, and it seems that she did not immediately realize where she was. A voice rang out in the room. Apparently, this man was waiting for her to wake up and was glad to see him now. She was finally awake. The old man who owned the voice held his left hand behind his back, and he had a book in his right hand, but now all his attention turned to the girl who woke up. It was Asses, the chief magician of the Fram Empire and the director of the Royal Academy. The first thing he asked was how Sierra was feeling, because she had been sleeping for several days. However, the girl herself was more interested in something else. She immediately wanted to know what happened to the ice dragon. Asses closed the book and recommended the girl to lie down. Because she needs rest, she should not worry about anything, since the ice dragon has already been destroyed. The old man, looking at the girl, asked what happened after the ice dragon died. Stammering, Sierra said she couldn't remember what happened after that. Ace closed his eyes and took out an object, telling Sierra to look at it. It was some kind of bottle with a purple flame shining inside. The girl stared at the object with excitement, realizing what was in front of her. The director explained that this flame was next to her when they arrived, and it did not disappear even when the girl was unconscious. It was hellfire, a flame that people will never be able to manipulate unless it is. The apostle, Sierra immediately thought about it. The old man said that even though the apostles have been missing for a long time, since hellfire appeared in this battle, they clearly don't know something. He put down the book that had been in his hands all this time, and, heading for the door, praised Sierra for her efforts, told her to rest. He himself did not want to interfere with her rest. Asses stopped at the door and spoke again. From his words, it became clear that the Empire would claim that it was their army, led by Sierra, that defeated the Ice Dragon. He turned to the girl and continued. According to Asses, anything that has anything to do with the apostles causes people a lot of unnecessary panic. So the army of the Fram Empire, including Sierra, just has to accept all the honors and praise for defeating the Ice Dragon. Through clenched teeth, Sierra Charlotte agreed with all the director's words, sitting on the bed and clutching the blanket tightly in her hands. The people in the streets rejoiced. Everyone thanked Mrs. Sierra for bringing them victory. It really was a universal holiday. Yulman was sitting at the table with his hand on his head. He witnessed everything that was happening on the streets and understood that there would be too much noise if his identity was revealed. But he was hurt and annoyed that he would never have the opportunity to see cute girls who would treat him as a hero. And he came to the world of people just to find a girlfriend. He got up from his seat, throwing a small bag over his shoulder. Now the guy was going to leave this city and hide somewhere. Soldiers were approaching the place where Yulman now lived. The guy was already saying goodbye with pain in his heart to his favorite tavern and a beautiful lady at the bar. However, soldiers came inside. The man who was at the head loudly asked who was a mercenary here. The visitors of the inn reacted instantly to this question. All of them immediately pointed to Yulman, who was going to sneak out of here. He thought for a moment that he had been discovered, but very soon the man told about his intentions. It became clear that he had been looking for Yulman for a long time. Now he is here to inform him that the guy was invited to take part in the passing test at the Royal Academy. The tavern immediately became noisy after such news. Isn't the Royal Academy the best academy in the Fram Empire? Someone was unhappy that this guy had only recently come here, and he had already been called there. Everyone was wondering why this happened. The man frowned. He didn't like the outrage coming from those who were here. He sternly asked if there were any of those present here who participated in the battle against the Ice Dragon, like this mercenary. Whispers began again among those present. In the battle against the Ice Dragon, only a handful of people survived. Is this guy one of them? The man said that everything was true, and added that, in addition, after participating in this battle, the guy remained unharmed. The man sternly looked at the soldiers gathered in the tavern and asked if they had any more questions about this. Everyone was silent. There was one person who raised his hand to ask a question. It was Yulman himself, and he asked only about the girls. Are there many beautiful girls in this academy? There really were a lot of beautiful girls at the Royal Academy of the Fram Empire. Yulman decided that he was in heaven. His mouth was almost watering. A man asked the director of Aces why he wanted to train this incompetent mercenary. Aces, smiling, replied that young people should be given the opportunity to show their strength, to prove themselves, as they can be unexpected talents. From the side, Aces watched a new student who stood and looked at the girls. Before the test began, the director of Aces congratulated everyone who was here on the chance to enter the Royal Academy. He said that the entrance test would begin right now, which would allow us to understand which of those present was suitable for the Royal Academy. The director added that he hopes that the participants will give their all, show what they are capable of in order to pass the test and survive. Among the many girls and boys began in silence. What was he talking about? What does survive mean? What did he mean by that? A large fiery paw stepped onto the floor of the hall. A fiery demonic wolf, a summoning beast that only experienced fire magicians can summon, appeared in front of the test participants. And he wasn't alone. Someone had already managed to get scared. Someone hoped that these wolves would not harm them, because this is just a test. Meanwhile, Yulman was not even worried. He, fascinated by some girl, asked her not to be afraid and promised that he would be able to protect her. The noise was growing in the hall. The participants were excited about the appearance of the fire wolf, but someone was sure that the monster was not real, because it was a simple test. Yulman looked with contempt at the panic that had risen, because, in his opinion, it was not worth making such a fuss over this small fish. One of those present was shouting, apparently trying to calm everyone down. He said that now is not the time to panic. On this test they all have to show what they are capable of. This guy was already ready to prove himself. He used magic to attack the beast, but the fire wolf quickly jumped over those green stalks that were aimed at him. The next attack, the airflow, also did not bring an effective result. It seems that the monster did not even feel it. The attacker's eyes widened. His face was covered with sweat. In an instant, the wolf was there and bit into human flesh, tearing it apart. The girl who was watching this could not move. She stood with tears coming to her eyes. The panic began to intensify. The test participants began to run away. They already realized that they could really lose their lives here. The monsters are real and can kill them. Many rushed to escape from here to escape. Yulman, looking at this, did not understand what was happening. His attention was attracted by some guy who called those who fled stupid, because in such a situation, mass flight is really a stupid decision, since those who run become the target of the monster. With an air chain, this guy detained the fire wolves and now told everyone else to attack while there was such an opportunity. An archer girl joined the battle, who told the archers to attack with arrows from the left flank. The magicians attacked from the right flank, the swordsmen attacked right in the center. A massacre began, in which the test participants tried to win together. The monsters fell, the guys managed to get the upper hand, which everyone was incredibly happy about now. They really managed to do it. Sincere smiles of the winners shone on their faces. However, soon people began to notice some movement. Frightened glances darted to where the defeated enemy lay. They realized that this was not the end. The resulting fiery ball shook the air, causing fright to all those present. The fire wolf Cerberus also appeared here, a huge beast with 3 wolf heads. It was furious. Someone commanded again, attack. The participants held weapons in front of them, preparing to resist. Cerberus grinned angrily, standing face to face with the test participants. One guy noticed that this is really the Royal Academy, since such a dangerous monster is used here only for the test. The wolf opened its mouth, throwing fireballs at its opponents. Some reached the target, some hit the floor with a noise. One such fireball flew straight towards Yulman, but he continued to stand still, believing that such a weak attack was not worth paying attention to, even though the others made so much noise out of it. A scream was heard from the side. A girl was rushing at Yulman. He was looking at her in panic and embarrassment. The girl who rushed straight at the guy saved him from the fireball. He, as if spellbound, looked at his savior, which is now hanging over him, lying on the floor. She asked to be careful because he was almost hit. The agitated girl looked at Yulman and asked if everything was all right with him. The apostle, blushing all over, stammered that everything was fine. Next to them, the noise of the fireball touching the ground was heard again. The girl looked in the direction of the sound and began to get up from the floor. Once on her feet, she turned to Yulman, asking him to be more careful next time. Now she, leaving Yulman behind, rushed to the center of the battle, intending to deal with this monster. The guy, still confused, looked after the savior. He was touched that she was really worried about his condition. Looking at the girl, he trembled. His heart began to beat faster. What is this strange feeling? The girl, in whose hand an ice boomerang began to form, threw it at the opponent. The boomerang flew to the target and hit the monster, causing him only irritation. The furious gaze of Cerberus pierced the offender. The girl sat down on the floor, touching the surface. The monster growled. Fire was firing from its mouth. The green vine hit the monster again. 3 participants appeared, saying that they would also be able to help. We should not forget about them. Their faces were serious. The girl asked everyone to distract Cerberus for a while so that she could apply a restraining spell. The swordsmen listened. They rushed straight at the monster to give the magician time. The fire wolf, growling loudly, scattered everyone who was nearby. The girl pushed off the floor, soaring up. Now she was hovering over the beast, creating a spell. However, Cerberus was not stupid. He immediately saw her and, angered even more, raised his heads up, hitting there with fireballs. The girl managed to jump back in time. She created ice fetters. The monster's legs were blocked by ice. Chains with collars descended from above, which turned out to be on the necks of Cerberus. She seems to have succeeded. Yulman thought that the test would be over soon. He wanted to be sure to talk to this lady when it was over. Someone in the crowd smiled. A jet of fire swept past the girl who stopped the monster. She, surprised, cast a glance at the monster, at which the blow was aimed. Everything was ablaze around Cerberus. The ice chains and shackles, colliding with the flames, shattered into pieces. The girl who tried so hard to stop the monster was almost knocked down. She thought only about the flames and the consequences. Some guy shouted with displeasure, because someone present is a complete fool. Once he thought of using fire magic. The magician created a wind barrier to block the flying fragments of ice and flames. Others were surprised by his wind magic and how he wielded it. Cerberus growled, enveloped in the currents of the wind. Yulman noted that the wind will not be able to extinguish the flame, but in this way it is possible to restrain it. The wind magician must have calculated this. Now the fire wolf was coming straight at the girl who had recently come to the aid of Yulman. She stared at the impending danger, her eyes wide. Her magic hadn't recovered yet, which was why she couldn't attack. The apostle decided that this was his chance to prove himself. He quickly found himself next to the girl, who only looked at him questioningly, wondering why he had come. Yulman put his arm around the magician's shoulder, hugging him to himself. He asked the little younger sister not to be afraid, because this wild dog just needs to be kicked. Flashing his eyes and putting out his foot, Yulman really kicked the wolf with it so that he finally stopped talking. Cerberus flew away. Yulman was standing next to the girl with a smug smile. He was thinking that he was able to charm this lady with this for sure. But, looking at her, the guy found that she was about to cry. He did not expect such a reaction. He imagined a completely different one. The apostle hurried to find out from her about this. He asked if she was hurt, fearing that he had touched her when he kicked this dog. The girl with tears in her eyes replied that everything was fine and asked Yulman to let her go. Only now the apostle came to his senses. He felt the softness and elasticity in his hand. The girl, closing her eyes, again asked not to touch her there. Yulman immediately recoiled, raising his hands in the air, as if to show that he was no longer touching her. He began to apologize and say that it didn't happen on purpose. Both stood confused and confused. The girl turned away, and the guy awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Other guys who witnessed the situation said that he caught the moment to touch the goddess, wondered how he managed to approach her, and at the same time envied, wanting to be in his place. After a difficult test for everyone, an announcement thundered, "This is the end of the test." A woman appeared in the hall in front of the test participants, who looked quite strict. She congratulated the guys and said that their test was over. A guy from among those present asked who she was. The woman introduced herself. It was Claire, the deputy director. The students started asking what the hell happened here. The woman asked uncomprehendingly. The student pointed to the dead students, saying that the usual test at the Royal Academy brought so many deaths, was so dangerous. The woman chuckled. The dead students that were lying on the floor began to gradually disappear, moving to the deputy, in whose hands the cards soon appeared. She asked what it had just said about the students. Everything fell into place. It was the magic of puppets. All the dead students are fakes. Someone said that, according to rumors, the deputy director of the Royal Academy can control objects with magic. Now that everything was settled, the deputy director was going to say a few words. First of all, she wanted to congratulate everyone on passing the test and entering the ace class of the Royal Academy of the Fram Empire. Yulman eavesdropped on the conversations of the girls, who were discussing the ace class among themselves, which is led by some great wizard. But Yulman's thoughts were about something else. He hoped that this wizard would turn out to be some cute little sister. Claire decided to immediately introduce the students to the person who will lead the ace class. Yulman, seeing this girl with red hair, was amazed. Sierra Charlotte, the ace class leader, will now be in charge of the guys. Some were surprised that the Fire Witch herself would be their leader. The deputy director noticed that it seemed that everyone had already heard about the reputation of Sierra's teacher, and told them to contact her directly if they had any questions. Claire said goodbye to the recruits, saying that it was time for her to return to her duties. The students crowded around Sierra, asking what they would do now. Yulman, lost in the crowd, tried to be inconspicuous. Sierra, looking sternly at her new students and crossing her arms over her chest, said that they could be free for today. And tomorrow at 7 o'clock everyone should gather at the training ground for practice in combat. She also shared her hope that they would all get along with each other, and told everyone to disperse if there were no more questions. Only one person had a question, so he asked Sierra, who was already ready to leave this place, to wait. She turned around and asked what was the matter. The guy said that they all got into the ace class because of their strength. Pointing his finger at Yulman, he asked why he got into this class, why he passed. Yulman tried his best to appear calm and to keep himself in control. Sierra asked what was wrong with this guy, and a barrage of criticism and complaints fell on him. He did nothing. He was too lustful. He was inactive and only sneaked up on other students. He was just terrible. The girl who saved Yulman and who was later saved by Yulman himself began to justify him, convincing him that everything was wrong, he was there to help her, and everything else was just an accident. This attempt to protect another student aroused the admiration of other students, who immediately considered the goddess very kind. With an invariably stern expression on her face, Sierra went straight to the apostle. He was excited. He was comforted only by the thought that the girl should not recognize him, because last time he erased her memory. Sierra stopped near Yulman and began to look thoughtfully at his face. It seemed very familiar to her. Is it possible that they had crossed paths somewhere before? The guy started to brush it off, claiming that it was simply impossible. She probably confused him with someone. However, even his words did not convince her that they really had never met. Is it accurate? Yulman tried to convince her again. This is absolutely certain, because he would remember such a girl, and definitely would not be able to forget her. The other guys were outraged by such shameless behavior. How did this guy dare to approach the Fire Witch herself? One of the students turned to Sierra, saying that she should not allow such a student to enter the ace class. Sierra Charlotte turned to the students, hurrying to calm them down. According to her, she will only temporarily place him in the ace class. She also added that the previous girl explained to them that what happened during the test was just an accident, and he didn't do anything wrong. Besides, he is the only one here who dared to help that girl, and stood up against Cerberus. This courage is not like an ordinary person. Yulman was touched. He thanked the teacher Sierra for such a compliment. The teacher herself turned to other students, saying that those who are against her decision, they can try to convince her. There were dissatisfied people, but there were no people willing to argue with the Fire Witch. On the night of the same day, Ace, the director of the Royal Academy, was informed that everyone who participated in the battle against the Ice Dragon got into the Ace class. Sierra and Claire were standing in his office. Sierra confirmed everything that was said by the principal and asked if it was possible that the Apostle would be among these students. The director did not answer her question. He only asked how the entrance test went. The deputy reported that there was a student on the test who was able to stand up against Cerberus, but the fact is that no one saw what happened. This disciple was standing right in front of Cerberus, and then Cerberus flew to the side as if his body was out of control. Aces suggested that if Cerberus just flew away, the student could simply use the magic of talent. Talent magic is spells that ordinary magicians will not be able to use. Only a few capable magicians can use them. Talent magic is the rarest kind of magic. Sierra wondered if that was really the case. The director told the girls not to think too much about the Apostle. It was already quite late, so he told them to go back and rest. The girls bowed and said goodbye to the director, asking him to go to rest too and wishing him good night. The door slammed shut behind the girls. Aces was left alone. He pulled out the cabinet of the table, where there was a hellfire in a bottle, the one that was found near the Sierra on the battlefield with the Ice Dragon. The director picked up this object and just looked at it, sighing. In the morning, Yulman walked through the territory of the academy and complained that he had to get up so early. He was not at his best and, yawning, complained of wanting to sleep. However, despite his fatigue, the guy quickly perked up when he saw the girl ahead. It was yesterday's little sister. Yulman's eyes sparkled. He realized that now was the right time to talk to her. The guy started running, greeting the girl on the way. He seemed determined to talk to her, his face a little flushed with embarrassment. Hearing a man's voice, the girl turned towards the guy, completely hitting him. He already felt like in paradise and almost fell off his feet. When Yulman came closer, the girl, straightening her hair, asked what he wanted from her. The Apostle spoke again about the situation that happened at yesterday's test, repeating that it was an accident. The girl was embarrassed, and then remembered that she had to thank the guy for yesterday, because she could not have escaped from that monster. But, according to her, everyone misunderstood the situation. Yulman said there was nothing wrong with that, because he wasn't worried about it at all. The girl smiled sweetly, and then said that she still did not know his name. In turn, she also introduced herself, Aisha, and then asked what her interlocutor's name was. Aisha's question drove Yulman to a dead end. He thought about it, and then said that his name was Yu, only his first name, no last name. Aisha said that this name suits him very well. Scratching his head, Yulman laughed at her words, and then offered to go to the place of study, because their class must have already gathered there. The guy who had been unhappy since yesterday that Yulman had gone to Ace's class watched these two from the side and for some reason was angry. As Yulman had expected, everyone was already assembled. The lesson could begin. Sierra announced that at today's lesson, the students will not fight against each other. Their opponent will be. A fiery beast appeared in the hall, Tiger Yong. Although he is the most common summoning fire-type beast, he has great fire power. Someone chuckled. Is it fair to the tiger that they will all deal with one tiger? But Sierra didn't say he'd be alone. She said that a lottery will be held, according to which students will be divided into pairs. 2 people with the same number will form a group, and within an hour, the couple must defeat the monster. The lottery started. Yulman got the number 7, which upset him because fate does not favor him. His number did not match Aisha's number. Her number is 1. Aisha's partner approached her. It was the same guy who disliked Yulman. He bowed, saying that he was very lucky, because he could unite with her. He introduced himself as Kyle, the eldest son of the Ballet family. Aisha replied that they didn't have much time, so they should first discuss the battle strategy. Kyle confidently said that, compared to the others, one person would be enough for them to defeat Tiger Yang, so he volunteered to deal with it for her. Aisha wanted to object and seemed upset, but Kyle had already turned around and was walking away. His thoughts were occupied with the fact that with his strength and the strength of the Ballet family, he would deal with Tiger Yang, and then this girl would take care of him. Now Kyle was standing in front of the fire tiger, who had already seen his victim in him. But for the guy, this monster was a small animal. He attacked him with a wind blade. Sierra watched what was happening, drawing some conclusions for herself. Kyle's talent magic is a broken limiter. It can increase the outgoing magic attack by 1 level. Now it seemed that along with the effect of the increase, his attack level had increased to intermediate, or even advanced. The fire tiger clawed the floor and glared at the boy, spewing fire from his mouth. Gathering his strength in his hands, Kyle, calling the tiger a pathetic insect, attacked him again. After the blow, a reaction followed. The air clashed with fire and enveloped the enemy. The other students were almost blown away from their seats. Such a strong wind was raised. Smiling, Kyle said that, as he said, he dealt with it quickly. The guy went to Aisha, saying that this training was very simple. Aisha didn't seem cheerful. She looked behind her partner's back, and then said that the monster was right behind his back. Kyle turned around. The tiger, eyes flashing, flew straight at him with its mouth open. It seems that the guy did not expect such a turn, because he was quite surprised. The animal knocked the guy to the ground, hanging from above, which caused Kyle's displeasure, who began to scold this beast. The tiger opened its mouth and breathed flames on Kyle. Other students were agitated. Someone was addressing the teacher. Sierra, frowning and thoughtful, silently watched. Kyle, using magic, threw the tiger away from him. He flew to the side. The guy got to his feet. Now he has definitely won. All battered and dirty, the guy apologized for the trouble and said he wasn't going to die here. Kyle returned to Aisha, asking how she liked his battle with the tiger. He added that their team should be the first to cope with this task. Sierra turned to the 2 students standing opposite each other and congratulated them, saying that they were the second of those who completed this task. Now they were allowed to rest. Kyle was stunned by this news. He asked again, "Are they second?" It seemed impossible, so the guy started protesting. No one could do it faster than he could. Here, in his opinion, there is clearly some kind of mistake. Sierra stood her ground. It's not impossible. She pointed out to the first team that she had finished the test. They have already completed the task and were 1 step ahead of the second team. Kyle was even more puzzled when he saw which team he was talking about. Yulman and his partner sat next to the tiger and were touched, stroking him like a little pet kitten. The observers also looked at this sweetness with joy. 15 minutes ago, Yulman stood upset and could not believe that he was so unlucky. A girl addressed him. He turned around, looked at her and asked if she was talking to him. The girl said that she also has number 7, because they will be in the same group. She immediately introduced herself. Her name was Augie. Yulman did not answer her, and she was not happy with such a reaction. Yulman's head was occupied only with Aisha. Her name flew from his lips. Augie, getting angry, called the guy a freak and, clutching her weapon in her hands, decided to teach him a lesson. Jumping up, she swung and was going to hit this insolent man who completely ignores her. Yulman, stopping the girl's weapon with 1 finger, said he could hear everything. The girl was still unhappy with this guy. She said she had heard that Yulman was a pervert. These words were like a knife to the heart. Augie told Yulman not to cause her problems, since she is able to cope with Tiger Young alone. Out loud, the guy agreed with her words, and then wondered if she could really cope on her own. The girl, pushing off with her feet from the surface, flew into the air and struck at the tiger. The tiger looked at her furiously, showing his fangs. The girl looked back at him with the same seriousness, tightly clutching her weapon in her hands. She hit the handle of the weapon on the ground with force. The tile cracked in the place where the blow was struck. With her foot, the girl hit the fire tiger hard, but he wrapped his fiery tail around her leg and threw her aside. Her weapon also flew to her. Augie was squatting on her haunches, gritting her teeth and looking at the opponent. In the jump, the tiger seemed even more furious and vicious. He flew straight at the girl, and she, in turn, grabbed the weapon and quickly inserted it into the tiger's mouth between the upper and lower jaw. She resisted to the last, but the tiger did not retreat. It was already hard for the girl to hold him. She thought she could have coped if she had been a little stronger. Yulman's voice came from behind the girl. He turned to the tiger, asking why he was so cruel to his little sister. The guy called him a little kitten and looked him straight in the eyes. The tiger stared at this guy with bulging eyes. Yulman calmly said that the matter with the tiger seemed to be resolved. Augie did not immediately understand what he was talking about and then looked at the tiger. There was nothing left of the furious beast. Now he was a friendly and cute kitten. Pointing her finger at the tiger, Augie screamed, asking what happened to him. Sierra noted that the most difficult way to defeat a monster is to tame it. Aisha said in surprise that this was the first time she had seen a person do something like that. Only Kyle was unhappy with this arrangement. Is this a joke? The thought was spinning in his head that he was fighting, and Yulman was just lucky to meet a harmless tiger. Now, when Yulman and Augie were making out with the tiger, Kyle decided to voice his thoughts. He said that he really envied Yulman's luck because he was lucky to meet a harmless tiger. Augie wasn't going to be silent. She stood up and shouted at Kyle. Another student agreed with Kyle, saying that he was telling the truth and complaining that their team had caught such an evil tiger that one of them was seriously injured. Without leaving the fiery beast, Yulman said that it was not luck, but his magic, the taming of the beast. Sierra was shocked by this statement. Kyle did not believe in this nonsense. He said that he had never heard of such talent magic and suggested that Yulman show it to everyone to prove the truth of his words. Yulman smiled. He didn't mind proving his words at all. The tiger that was lying on its back raised its head. Several of these fiery monsters appeared around Yulman, but they did not touch him. The students wondered what was going on with these animals. The guy said that, as the saying goes, you won't see, you won't believe. The tigers behind him seemed to bow obediently to their master. Yulman added that if someone didn't see something, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. He was smiling, showing off his magic. Kyle couldn't understand how this could be. Aisha looked at it with bulging eyes. Augie was surprised that her partner was hiding such strength. Everyone present saw with their own eyes that Yulman was telling the truth. Sierra finally joined the conversation, saying that that was enough, we could finish training for today. She removed the monsters, and then turned to Yulman, asking when he was going to register his talent magic, because it has not been registered yet. The apostle said that no one asked him to do this. Sierra apologized to the students and said that the situation was urgent, so she needed to go to the academic affairs department to bring in new information. Sierra was already leaving. With that, the training came to an end. Now everyone could be free. Yulman was looking at her back. He was thinking that once, fortunately, he had read one of the human novels, in which there was the magic of talent, taming, because Sierra should not suspect anything. A bright sunny day. There were a lot of people scurrying around the academy. Yulman was standing in the company of Aga and Aisha. Augie slapped Yulman on the back and, calling him a pervert, said that she did not expect him to have such strength. It was commendable. Yulman indignantly asked not to call him that, because he is not a pervert at all. He has a name, you. Aisha stood silently next to him and smiled sweetly. Then Kyle appeared and started talking about the magic of Yulman's talent again. According to him, now it is not surprising that Cerberus did not attack him at the entrance test. Others agreed with Kyle. His words were similar to the truth. The apostle, it seemed, was already tired of these conversations. It started again. Someone said that with the ability to control a summoning beast, the guy could easily direct Cerberus to attack everyone else. Another student suggested that Yulman deliberately did this, and then used the opportunity to grope the goddess. The guy was amazed that the human imagination can be so developed. Augie stood up for her partner, defending his rights. Does the fact that he can do it say that it was so? Besides, would they all have been able to pass the test if you had sent Cerberus straight at them? The students thought about it. Aisha joined Augie to exonerate Yulman. According to her, talent magic requires great abilities and long training. Besides, the wind barrier at that time was unlikely to be able to resist Cerberus, and you saved her in time. So she is very grateful to him and hopes that the students will no longer make erroneous assumptions. Kyle was hurt because of the girl's words that the wind barrier would not be able to resist. He clenched his hands into a fist. His anger was at the limit. This girl, in his opinion, is lying to help that freak. Yulman didn't need anything else. He was melting from Aisha's kindness and from her words. Augie, who also sided with and defended you, was deprived of attention. Someone knocked on the door of the director of the Royal Academy. Aces, let me in. Sierra rushed in impatiently, claiming that she had found him, a man with the magic of the taming talent. The director, who was sitting at the table in front of an open book, was very intrigued by her words. The first thing the principal asked was how strong the beasts could be controlled by the student in question. Sierra didn't know the answer to that question herself yet, but it looked like this student could instantly tame a Cerberus-type beast. The director of Aces said that Sierra should find out as soon as possible. Yulman, Augie and Aisha were together now. Augie, stretching tiredly, was annoyed that the rest time ended so quickly. Checking the notes, Aisha thoughtfully said that it seemed that today they would be going through history. Yulman didn't understand, so he asked again. Aisha replied that, according to rumors, this is a subject that deeply studies many major historical events. Yulman hoped that they would not talk about the cities that he had bombed. Augie noticed teacher Sierra. The other two also looked at her. Yulman had a bad feeling. Strictly, Sierra said that Yulman needed to go to the court tower with her. 4 beautiful girls were depicted on stone columns inside the courthouse tower. That's where Sierra brought Yulman. They came to the center of the hall. Yulman, laughing, asked why Miss Sierra brought him here. Sierra was going to ask the guy something. Sierra Charlotte said she would only ask him once if he would become a disciple of the Fire Witch. Yulman did not expect such an offer, and Sierra was sure that no one would refuse to be a disciple of the great Imperial Magician. However, there was one who refused. It was Yulman. The offer was not to his taste. Sierra, apparently not immediately understanding the answer, already ready for his consent, smiled automatically and asked to wait a minute. And then the realization came to her, he refused. At first she asked again, and then she screamed loudly at the whole hall. Pointing at Yulman with her finger, she asked if he had really just refused. Yulman answered honestly and seriously. He is here only to find a wife. He is not here at all to become someone's student and work hard. And then an idea came to him, which he voiced. There is no rule that would prohibit a student and a teacher from getting married. Sierra immediately told him not to even think about it. The guy sighed sadly, regretting such an instant rejection. Sorry. In that case, he was ready to just leave the tower and told Sierra to forget about taking him as an apprentice. Sierra gritted her teeth. How does he think to find a wife with his status? These words struck a chord, so he stopped. Sierra invited him to remember how he lived before he got into this academy. Memories came flooding back immediately. When Yulman first came to the world of people, he found that the price tags here were more than the records of the apostles. Even the cake was too expensive for him. He also faced a large commission. Yulman imagined what would have happened if he had returned to the old days. Aisha would have run away from him. Because of his poverty they could not be together. Just thinking about it, Yulman screamed loudly that this would never happen. Sierra smiled as if she expected such a result, and then said that if he became her disciple, he would receive status and access to her property. The girl rose into the air. A fire was burning around her. She decided to ask for the last time, is this guy ready to become a student of Sierra Charlotte? Yulman laughed. Did Miss Sierra really think she could convince him so easily with just that? But immediately the guy ran to the teacher and said that he agreed to everything and was ready to become her student. Sierra told Yulman not to jump here, but he jumped up, hugging the girl by the legs. Now they both collapsed on the floor. Clinging to the feet of the master, Yulman said that she should encourage her student. Various signs and objects were reflected on the ceiling of the courtroom. It looked really fascinating. 2 people were lying on the floor in the very center, Sierra and Yulman, who had agreed to become her disciple. The girl said that the guy might not worship her and asked him to finally let her go. Yulman asked what was wrong with the student holding the master's hips. The ceiling shone. Yulman immediately drew attention to it and fixed his gaze on the light streaks flying in their direction. Sierra called him an idiot. One of the stone girls from the column reported that the contract had been concluded. A fiery mark appeared on Yulman's forehead. He immediately touched this place and said that there was something strange on his forehead. Sierra clenched her fist. She seemed angry. At the same moment, she grabbed Yulman by the collar and asked if he knew that when a contract is signed between a master and a disciple, the mark of the contract appears in the place where they touched. Yulman said that the girl did not warn him about it. She released him and sighed. Holding her head, she closed her eyes and said that, in any case, this label does not appear just like that. Only now did Yulman realize that Sierra's mark was now on her hip. The academic canteen was noisy. The guys were discussing the latest news. Teacher Sierra had summoned you to the court tower, and he didn't seem to have returned from there yet. Augie and Aisha were sitting at the same table and looked like something had upset them. Augie said that in the court tower, the Royal Academy judges and punishes students. Aisha was upset because Yulman had done nothing wrong. Kyle just laughed at this situation. He said that apparently Yulman lied about his magic talent Taming, and it was discovered. Glancing at Augie, he added that it seems that the lower strata are worried about each other. Yulman must have been expelled yesterday. After all, the dregs remain the dregs. Augie was furious. She yelled at Kyle, asking what he was talking about. Aisha tried to calm her friend down, but Kyle did not let up, saying that there was nothing surprising in her behavior, because she was the same trash as Yulman. Aisha angrily turned to Kyle, reminding him that quite recently he himself had seen the magic of Yulman's talent with his own eyes. This is a fact, so the guy should better watch his words. The voice of the man who was being so violently discussed now rang out. He witnessed a conversation about himself. Kyle looked in his direction. Yulman smiled, saying that he had only been away for one night, but they had already missed him. Now he looked somehow different, and there was a bag of money on his belt. Aisha beamed. It was impossible not to notice that she was glad to see her friend. Yulman said that the girl is very nice as always. Augie said that he was still lustful and got the answer. She was called the same, cruel and active. Augie asked why Sierra's teacher took him away yesterday, and Kyle, intervening again, asked what they were doing there. He must have been expelled from the academy. Aisha excitedly said that none of this was true. Yulman smiled smugly, saying that nothing had happened, except that Master Sierra had signed a contract with him. Have they signed a master and apprentice contract? Even ordinary passers-by were shocked, not to mention Augie, Aisha, and Kyle. The apostle took a step forward, showing others the mark, which was supposed to be proof that he was not lying. Talking about the contract of the master and the disciple with the teacher Sierra, Kyle chuckled again. He said that even if Yulman has the magic of taming animals, he was just lucky that there were animals on the test. If it had been different, would he have got into the ace class? Kyle Bollet suggested that Yulman try to fight him. Aisha intervened, angrily saying that even if so, Yulman still has talent magic. She is strong enough to enter the ace class. The apostle was touched by his defender. She wanted to say something else, but Kyle rudely interrupted her, using wind magic. Augie was shocked, and Yulman was angry. Kyle told the girl not to get into someone else's conversation when she wasn't asked to. Augie immediately ran up to her friend, asking if she was okay. She said that everything was fine and asked not to worry. Yulman asked again about Kyle's offer to fight him. Smiling sweetly, he agreed to it. With a twinkle in his eyes, the apostle expressed his hope that Mr. Kyle would be gentle with him. Kyle and Yulman were standing opposite each other, each of them looking directly into the eyes of the opponent. Crossing his arms over his chest, Yulman first of all asked about the rules. What conditions will their duel have? Kyle said that he would release the maximum of his magical energy and strike. If Yulman survives, he wins. If he loses, he will have to immediately leave the ace class. Augie was angry. This Kyle is so mean. There is not a single monster there now, and it's not at all fair to you, whose magic is animal control. Aisha just watched in silence. Yulman noticed that Mr. Kyle looked confident. He smiled. Air currents began to appear around him, and then a sword formed in his hand. This weapon attracted the apostle's attention. Aisha jumped up from her seat, saying that this could not be, and stared at Kyle and the sword. Augie excitedly asked what was the matter. She told one legend, according to which one day the ancestor of the Bollet family received as a gift from the king of the elements countless amounts of gold and silver, as well as one of the rarest treasures. If Aisha's memory does not fail, this sword is called Excalibur. Yulman told Kyle that he had a very interesting sword. He offered the guy this. If he, Yulman, loses, he will not only leave the ace class, but also leave the academy itself. Kyle was pleased. He said with a sneer that Yulman finally realized that he did not belong here. But Yulman continued to voice his conditions. If Kyle loses, he will have to give him his sword. Kyle was taken aback. Augie, who was watching from the side, shouted that Kyle was not an easy opponent, but still wished Yulman good luck and hoped that he would cope. Yulman smiled broadly, asking Kyle if he thought he might lose. Kyle gritted his teeth and accepted all the conditions. He asked not to blame him for the fact that there are no beasts here that could help Yulman block his sword. He also ordered you not to dare to ask him for mercy. Kyle held the sword out in front of him, saying something in an unknown language. Yulman noticed that this sword releases magical energy quite well. The two girls watched the progress of the battle with furrowed brows. Kyle screamed and, striking with his sword, used the wind sentence. Yulman only waved one hand and stopped the enemy's attack with it, which shocked him. Because of the rising dust and wind, the girls could not see everything that was happening on the battlefield, and now they were watching and did not understand who had defeated whom. Kyle stammered and asked how Yulman was able to stop his attack. Yulman just smiled, saying that it was not worth wasting time. Kyle did not have time to do anything, when suddenly the sword was already in the hands of Yulman, who said that he would accept it. He thanked Mr. Kyle and praised him for such generosity and for the excellent weapon. Kyle was furious. He clenched his fists, but he could not really answer because these were the conditions of the battle. Aisha and Augie were happy for their friend. It was great that he won, but they were also interested in his well-being. Yulman looked at the girls who were shouting something at him and then remembered how Kyle attacked Aisha. The apostle said that he hoped that this would never happen again. His eye flashed red. Yu's behavior scared Kyle seriously. He looked at him questioningly, and then Yulman's hand touched Kyle's chest, striking a magic blow. Spitting blood, Kyle flew to the side, crashing into something and smashing what he came into contact with. Aisha and Augie were looking at what their friend had just done with round eyes again. Kyle, who had just been defeated, lay unconscious. Still with his arm outstretched, Yulman looked at his opponent. He was pleased and was smiling all over. Well, that's it. Kyle, wounded, lay on his back and coughed up blood. He tried to get up. His body was shaking. He did not believe that such a thing was possible. How could Yulman defeat him? Yulman smiled and said that he was taking this sword for himself, as they had agreed earlier. Kyle didn't like it. Yulman was hailed by his girlfriends. He turned around, and they ran to him, rejoicing at his victory. Augie looked at the sword, admiring the fact that Yulman was really taking it. Aisha noted that the guy is stronger than she thought. The girl's words confused him a little. He modestly said that he was actually very strong. Augie suddenly had an idea. She said that since they had no lessons today, they could throw a party and celebrate Yulman's victory. He liked this idea. His eyes sparkled when he presented a large amount of food. While the three were rejoicing and making plans, Kyle was shaking with anger behind their backs. Maybe panic was added to this. He didn't know what would happen to him if his father found out that Excalibur was lost. He shouted loudly to stop the departing students. Yulman turned his head in his direction without a trace of a smile. Kyle was already on his feet. He declared that he could not give this sword to Yulman. Aisha was angry because the sword was a condition that Kyle himself agreed to. She still hadn't given up hope that Kyle would be able to keep his word. But Ballet decided to go to the last. According to him, Yulman definitely cheated somehow, and only for the sake of justice the sword should be returned to the owner. However, Yulman was not going to make concessions. He refused to return the sword, which seems to have caused Kyle's sincere surprise. Ballet asked if he was definitely refusing. He decided to use magic, saying that in this case, Yulman cannot hope that he will be able to leave unharmed from this site. Kyle used a wind vortex against this company. Augie noticed that it seems Kyle can't afford to lose this sword. The apostle, collecting magical energy in his hand, said that, alas, nothing would come of the guy. Yulman held the sword in his hand, sometimes looking at it thoughtfully. Kyle again ordered him to return his sword. Only in this case he was ready to spare the opponent. Yulman, smiling, asked what would happen if he refused. The answer was not long in coming: death. Ballet said that he would die if he did not do as he was told. The wind mage used his spell again, this time wind vortex blade. The apostle was facing danger, but he didn't seem scared. Because of the wind and dust, visibility was zero. Augie and Aisha only covered their faces while in this vortex. Some kind of glow appeared in the air in front of the guys. They looked at what was happening. Even Kyle was puzzled. It was Excalibur that rose into the air. The jewel in it sparkled. Something continued to happen with the sword. All this was accompanied by a dazzling glow, because of which the girls covered their eyes. Yulman watched curiously, standing very close. In place of Excalibur, a girl with long green hair appeared. Not a trace of the sword remained. The girl sat down on the ground and introduced herself. Her name is Sylph. She got down on one knee, bowing before Yulman, and announced that she, the sword of the king of the elements, welcomes the new owner. Augie thought she misheard. Did this girl really just say that she was the sword of the king of the elements? Aisha and Kyle were just as shocked as Augie. The girl who appeared in the place of the sword knelt before Yulman, introducing herself and greeting the new owner. Yulman, interested, immediately guessed that Sylph was the spirit of this sword. Sylph confirmed his words. Yes, she is actually the spirit of Excalibur, according to the agreement of Yulman and Kyle. Now she, the sword of the king of the elements, will belong to the new owner. She hurried to find out what her master wanted. Augie concluded that it was not surprising that this sword was considered a precious treasure, since it even had a spirit. To begin with, the apostle asked Sylph to get up from her knees. She immediately obeyed. Kyle, enraged, said that only he himself is her real master. Sylph looked at the guy indifferently and said nothing. Kyle kept yelling. He was sure that he definitely wouldn't have lost if the sword spirit had shown up earlier. He ordered Sylph to return back to him immediately. Augie was amazed at the shamelessness of this guy. How could he even say such a thing? Aisha also looked without much pleasure at everything that was happening here. Yulman turned to Sylph to find out if she wanted to return to her former master. The answer was given quickly and without much thought. No, she didn't want that. After that, she explained her decision. Firstly, conditions were agreed at the beginning of the duel. The old owner put her on the line and lost. Naturally, Sylph changed her master. Secondly, it is up to her to decide whether to change the owner or not. Kyle wasn't satisfied with her words. They were out of his ego. Yulman sternly said that now that Sylph had clarified everything, he was asking Mr. Kyle to stop humiliating himself even more. Kyle's displeased gaze never left his opponent. Meanwhile, Yulman decided to apologize to Sylph for using her as a bet. Ono bent down, stroking her on the head. The apostle also asked if she would help him in the future. The girl was taken aback, and then smiled and gave a positive answer. Of course she would help him. Kyle couldn't calm down. He laughed, saying that they shouldn't underestimate his strength. He decided to use magic again, but this time it didn't look the same as before. Now his energy turned red. He said that since this has happened, he will reveal something now. Ballet shouted that, as a member of such a significant family, he could not allow such scum to offend him. His hands were raised up. Something began to form right above him. He called the spell Flight of the Phoenix, and a fiery bird appeared right above him. Augie was afraid that with such an attack, Kyle would not leave a single piece of this place. Yulman asked not to worry about it. He was going to sort everything out. But suddenly someone's hands grabbed his hand. It was Sylph. She asked the owner to use her. Smiling, he agreed, telling her to lend him her powers if she wanted to participate in this. A firebird hovered above them, making noises. A sword appeared in Yulman's hands. Sylph became him again to allow the master to use his powers. The apostle saw his goal. He was serious and resolute. With a few sword strokes, he crushed the phoenix, leaving it defeated behind his back. The power of Kyle's spell dissipated. The shockwave knocked him off his feet. He could only scream. Aisha and Augie were also barely able to stand on their feet. Yulman was standing on the wreckage with a sword in his hand. His friends were now standing nearby, looking around. Kyle Ballet, wounded and defeated for the umpteenth time, lay on the ground and said that it was all over now. Restaurant. It was crowded inside. Students were sitting at the table studying the menu of the institution. Aga also had a menu in her hands. She joyfully proclaimed that the victory over Kyle was being celebrated now. 4. Yulman, Sylph, Augie and Aisha were sitting at a table that was bursting with various treats and dishes, among which there were sweets. Sylph looked at it thoughtfully, because she had never seen such food before. Aisha said that Sylph should definitely try something here, because the food prepared in this restaurant is very tasty. Yulman's hair stood on end. He decided that now he had a chance to conquer Aisha's heart, and this chance should be taken advantage of. The guy asked if Aisha knows how to eat so that it tastes better. Aisha suggested that you need to eat everything while it's warm. Yulman's eyes sparkled, because he had his answer ready. He just needed him to feed her with a spoon. Aisha was confused by his words. Augie said that she suddenly felt full, and Sylph was already enjoying her meal. In the office of the deputy director, Claire was sitting at her desk. In front of her were two papermen who depicted a very familiar picture. One was standing with a sword in his hands, and the other was almost lying on the ground. Plier took a small sword from the little man's hands, believing that in the end Kyle lost his Excalibur to a student named Yu. The paperman, as if confirming the truthfulness of her words, nodded his head. The deputy director exhaled. She told me to tell Sierra and Director Aces about this so that they could decide together what to do and what to do next. Claire thought about the fact that that sword had a spirit. She was afraid that the Ballet family would not just leave what had happened. It was already quite late. It was dark outside. In the dormitory building, Yulman was lying on his bed, thinking about what amazing people, since they could create such a yummy from simple ingredients. His smile never left his face. In his opinion, Aisha was so sweet and gentle today. If she had married him, then in his castle. Yulman's imagination was already at full work. He fantasized how Aisha was sitting with dessert in her hands, asking if he was hungry, because today she cooked him his favorite food. And after that she was interested in what he wanted to eat first, the dish or her. The apostle was tumbling from side to side on his bed, repeating the name of his beloved. Sylph saw all his throwing. She sat touching the edge of the bed, noticing that her master seemed very happy. The girl appeared so suddenly that she frightened Yulman with her appearance. He jumped up, pulling the blanket over himself. Sylph drooped and immediately apologized, explaining that she suddenly felt strong fluctuations in the emotional state of the owner, and therefore appeared without permission. The apostle hastened to calm her down, saying that everything was fine. She just had to tell him next time when she decided to appear before him in human form. He stroked her head again. Sylph agreed with all his words, and then asked why he was so happy now. The guy replied that he was so happy because spring had come to him, and everything was boiling inside him. Sylph noticed that this is very similar to the desire for physiological needs that she knows about. Yulman closed his eyes, saying that it was almost the same thing. The girl suddenly grabbed his clothes with one hand, which caused surprise. Looking at the owner, she suggested that maybe she could help him with his condition. The guy didn't get it at first, so he thought about it. And then, blushing, he said that it was not very good. Sylph insisted, because it is her job to help her master. Yulman assumed an imperturbable look and, raising his fist to his chin, with his eyes closed, said that he did not mind, since she herself sincerely wanted to help him. Sylph conjured scissors. Yulman looked at them uncomprehendingly. The girl, holding this object in her hands, warned that it might hurt a little, but she would try to be gentle. The apostle, realizing what was the matter, immediately fell to his knees, asking for forgiveness and admitting his mistake. In another room, Sierra was sitting on a bed in her night clothes. She was holding a pile of papers in her hands. Among them, she found a surname, Zessie, the same as the general's, but she knew that the general's family did not have a daughter named Aguirre. But the last name is the same. On one of the sheets there was a questionnaire of Yulman. She was looking at his picture and couldn't imagine how he beat Kyle today. However, the Fire Witch decided to postpone this matter until tomorrow, personally asking Yulman about it. Now she put all the papers on the table and turned off the light in the room. On top of all the other questionnaires on the table was Aisha's questionnaire, from which it became known that she is a noblewoman. Her mother's name is Lilith Lawrence, and her stepfather is Paul Lawrence. Her place of residence is the western suburbs, the estate of the Lawrence family, and also her feature is that she uses close combat.